The Last Kingdom versus history, a right royal mix-up. Alright, settle in, mate, because we're about to take a jaunt through the muddy fields of history, wading through blood, battles, and a lot of, let's be honest, what could have been a proper British brew-up. But here's the kicker, how much of The Last Kingdom is actually true? Spoiler alert, it's a bit of a mix. A dash of truth, a pinch of poetic license, and a lot of don't let the facts get in the way of a good story. So grab your ale, and let's give this a proper look, shall we? Alfred the Great, the man, the myth, the shield wearer. Now, if you thought Alfred the Great was a bit of a drama queen, you wouldn't be the only one. In The Last Kingdom, they really sell you on his struggles, and credit where it's due. Alfred was a proper battle-hardened monarch. But was he really the saintly, sickly figure we see in the show? Well, kinda, but not really. Here's the thing, Alfred was a sickly bloke, sure, always battling illness, poor lad, but let's not forget, he managed to pull together the warring Saxon kingdoms like some sort of medieval party planner. He wasn't just the King of Wessex, he was also the bloke who laid the foundations for what would become the Kingdom of England. Not only was he fighting Danes, but he was also rebuilding society, setting up a legal code, and generally being a right good egg in the grand scheme of things. But here's the fun part, did he really go around moaning about his health while the kingdom burned? Well, that's probably a bit of dramatic flair. Alfred didn't lie in bed swaddled in blankets like a medieval hypochondriac. He was out there leading armies, sorting out taxes, and reading books in his spare time. So, yeah, the Last Kingdom probably made him a bit more frail than he actually was. And while we're at it, that whole Alfred burning the cakes bit. True, but he didn't get all sulky about it. He was more of a whoops, my bad kind of guy than the sulking character we see in the show. Uhtred of Bebbanburg, real or fantasy? Now, let's talk about Uhtred, the legend. Uhtred, son of Uhtred. That bloke's name should be on a t-shirt by now. But the question is, did he actually exist? Well, sort of. There was a Uhtred of Bebbanburg, but the character we know and love is largely a creation of Bernard Cornwell, who wrote the Last Kingdom books. The real Uhtred did live in Northumberland, but he wasn't out there riding across Britain in the dead of night, fighting like some sort of medieval James Bond. In fact, the historical Uhtred wasn't quite the warrior we see on screen. The real Uhtred was a bit more involved in the politics of the time, making deals and navigating the rough and tumble of Anglo-Saxon leadership. No flashy sword fights for him. Though I wouldn't say no to a pint with him, he probably knew all the right taverns, eh? The Saxon-Danish rivalry, all that blood and guts. Now, when it comes to Saxons and Danes going at it, well, the show nails it. The Danes were a serious threat, no joke. Vikings were raiding, pillaging, and doing what Vikings do best, making everyone else's life hell. The battles in The Last Kingdom aren't that far off from the actual history. Alfred did wage war against the Danes, and he was behind a lot of the strategic fortifications that helped protect Saxon England. But let's not get carried away with the dramatic, bone-crushing battles. Sure, there was blood on the sand, but the amount of battles Alfred fought against the Danes might have been a touch exaggerated for effect. The show makes it look like it was all about bloody combat and endless sieging, but in reality, Alfred was a bit more of a diplomatic operator. He made alliances, married off his daughters for strategic advantage, and, well, did a lot of political maneuvering. All in all, the war bits are definitely the juicier parts of the show, but don't let that fool you into thinking it was all skirmishes and sword fights. The role of women, a Viking queen. Now, let's have a chinwag about the ladies. There's a character in the show, Lagertha, who's a bit of a Viking badass, right? She's always leading men into battle and generally making the blokes look like amateurs. But here's the thing, she's a bit more myth than history. The real women of the Viking world were often rulers and warriors in their own right. Lagertha herself was more of a legendary figure, a warrior queen from the sagas, than a documented historical character. That said, there were powerful women in the Viking world. Take Aetheflaed, for example. She was Alfred's daughter, and she was known for her military prowess. She was a bit of a powerhouse in her own right. But no, she wasn't out there throwing axes like Lagertha. Aethflaed was more of a general, overseeing the defense of Mercia while the blokes had their sword fights. The end of the show, Alfred's legacy, and finally, let's chat about how the show wraps up Alfred's life. The historical Alfred did die young, way before he probably should have, but the show makes it feel like he's this broken, old man watching his empire crumble. In truth, Alfred was a bit of a warrior poet right up to the end. His death wasn't quite as tragic as the show makes it out to be, but hey, a bit of artistic license never hurt anyone, right? So, what's the bottom line here, love? The Last Kingdom does a decent job of capturing the spirit of the time, raw, brutal, and full of tension. But, like most historical dramas, it takes some creative liberties. The characters are based on real people, but they are not always portrayed exactly as they were. Alfred the Great? He wasn't as sickly and helpless as they make him out to be. Uhtred of Bebbanburg? A bit of a romanticized version of the real Uhtred. The battles? Yeah, they happened, but not as gloriously or as often as we see on screen. In the end, it's a great watch, full of action, intrigue, and, well, a lot of historically questionable but bloody fun. Just don't take everything as gospel. After all, if you did, you might start thinking you could swing a sword as well as Uhtred himself. And that's a right laugh, isn't it?